Around about 2010, it started to become clear to me, oh, we really are getting a lot more corrupt now in our societies. Universities are becoming very bureaucratic, are starting to care less about students. Things weren't that bad yet, but they were getting a lot worse.
Hmm.
But it was kind of okay, academics are no longer in charge. We're second-rate citizens. Students are now starting to be less important. It's more starting to be
Customers.
about, fee-paying foreign students, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And basically, when Corona came, the lockdowns, the vaccines, which were, of course, a huge autocratic overreach in our societies, we thought, okay, this is getting ridiculous, right? Universities not even pushing it back against this. They're really not caring about the physical and mental health of their students. We got to do something about this. And also, we were then in the position to do something about this.
Welcome to another dialogue with Propaganda in Focus. Since at least 9/11, and more recently, especially since the global COVID operation, careful observers have noted how the forces of big business, closely allied with big government, have worked to homogenize cultures and to control more and more resources, and more importantly, human reproduction. It's the new normal, we're told, so we've got to get on board with the program. Over the past 2 decades at least, educators, scholars, clinicians, and other professionals have looked on aghast at this demolition of civil society and constitutional rights. Some have spoken up and have paid the price and a sacrifice of their own livelihoods. Others, emboldened by their own courage and dignity, have responded in positive and constructive ways. Among them is Professor Paul Frijters and colleagues with Academia Libera Mentis. Today, I'd like to welcome Paul, former professor of well-being economics at the London School of Economics, who is currently serving as professor of economics at MBS College in Saudi Arabia. Paul's research interests span the globe with work on migration issues in China and Indonesia, and corruption in Australia, to well-being in Scandinavia, in the UK, and in New Zealand. He has written extensively in micro and macroeconomics and is widely recognized as a key theorist and researcher in economics today. I'm very excited to finally welcome Paul and to hear more about the exciting work being done with Academia Libera Mentis. Welcome, Paul.
Great to be on the show, Dan.
Well, before we begin, in reading through some of your background on well-being, I was kind of reminded of some of the work I'd encountered about 10 years ago by Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett in their book, The Spirit Level. Um,
Mhm.
they argue something to the effect that reducing income differences in society has the potential to eliminate all social problems and ills. And of course, so much has changed since its publication. I'm sure you've heard of the work, and I'm just kind of curious, wondering if you think their thesis still holds.
Um, I think literally no, but in spirit, yes. So literally no. If you have no income differences, humanity doesn't stop, right? We are an aggressive species, and that won't change whether or not we have income differentials or not. So there will continue to be politics. People will then start to use other things as status symbols. They will still fight with each other for the desirable males and females and as much space as possible for their kids rather than somebody else's kids. And so I won't say history stops and we're in paradise when there are no income differences. But is it true that a society with less income differences will have less tension? Yes, definitely.
Hmm.
And also the converse, at a certain level of inequality, society breaks apart. And I will also say that in the West, we've reached that level of inequality. We've reached an unsustainable level of inequality for the culture we have. And that says the only question is, okay, what calamities are we going towards? Because
Hmm.
there's the famous historian Scheidel who looked over thousands of years what happens to societies when they're unequal, and he basically said, look, they only get back to a more equal place via disaster. And a disaster is either a natural disaster, which wipes away a lot of wealth, or there is a civil war, which wipes a lot of wealth, or somebody else invades, and that sorts out the problem,
Hmm.
or something like that, right? There is no going back via a kind of a change of mind internally. It only goes via disaster. It's just those who control and have so much when they are with so few, they don't walk that back. That only gets us, we're normalized
Hmm.
via some enormous disaster. And the mechanism behind that is that only after a disaster do you have fanatics who are truly willing to take on the super rich and put them back to size. And we're nowhere near that. We're nowhere near that at this moment. At this moment, we are in a somewhat feudal situation, I would say,
Hmm.
whereby there are a few haves and the rest are doing their bidding. And there's very little challenge of this, very little challenge, right? And so it'll take a while, and the road to normalization will probably involve some disaster. That's what history tells us. It's
Hmm.
not a nice message to start our interview with, but
It's a great
I do
topic,
think
though.
it goes to a fundamental aspect of our society now. Yeah.
It's a great topic. I see a little bit in the news that I'm able to consume coming out of France. There seems to be the yellow vests coming out again and
Mhm.
attempting to take some action against the oligarchs. Are you
The
seeing?
French are very aware of these kind of things. They talk about this. And of course, they have a history of revolutionary fervor. But my understanding from my French friends, and I now live in a part of Belgium that speaks French, and
Mm,
they're quite plugged into the francophone world, is that they are still far off real change and real rebellion. Right? They're still far off that. I mean, Macron has some years left to go. The whole upper layer of France is still with the program, as it were.
mm,
They are getting worried because they think the Front National, run by Le Pen, and also her second in command, is quite popular, is expected to win the next presidential elections. That'll have them worried, and they'll try to figure out some way to undermine their popularity. But we're still some way off an actual explosion, as I understand it.
mm. Yeah, the I agree with everything you've said so far. It seems as though the plutonomy is or the oligarchs are acting as though they're gods and they can do what they will.
Yes, I totally agree. And they're no longer citizens of our society. That's the
Mm,
thing. They're not part of us anymore. They don't think of themselves as Dutch, French, Belgian, German. No, they're kind of like, as you say, gods, Übermensch,
mm,
right? And the
yeah,
rest of us do their bidding, and they take us for granted. I mean,
yeah.
it's kind of like ants to them now. Well, I feel like a protesting ant, right?
Same here. So, regards Academia Libera Mentis, to visitors to the landing page, I see that it poses a couple of very simple questions, which I really like, very pragmatic. And it asks young people, it seems to me, wherever they may be, to critically reflect on their own condition It seems to me too that these are key questions that most education systems today they don't really encourage young learners to ask. The questions seem verboten. And can you take us through the history that inspired you and your colleagues to organize an institution around these sorts of important questions?
Yes, we pose the question, are you happy with the lot in life that is likely if you go to mainstream places, which is subservience, basically compliance, until the system explodes when you're left with nothing. And we pose the question, well, would you want a better education and also one that takes more leadership, ownership over both your own future and that of your group as a whole, become proud communities? And where we came from, we are a bunch of academics who've known each other for quite a while, in some cases over 20 years. And we were all unhappy in the system, right? Many of us were doing well in the system, still have ties to the system, but we saw university lose their mission. They no longer were the places they were a century ago, with a few hundred students. Now they've got tens of thousands of students, they're factories. It's about safe spaces, so nothing of interest gets said because then somebody might complain and get upset. So they don't do that anymore, which means they don't challenge anymore.
Mm.
They also hardly are interested in the well-being of students, their physical health, their mental health, just not their problem, right? They sort of are supposed to see something online and then they'll hand in an AI generated essay, and that's sort of fine for a university. They no longer care. The universities are not really busy with students anymore. They're into property deals and into appearing to be great at research and their rankings, but students, they hardly fail any, they hardly educate any. They're just numbers, and they try to get them out of the door with the least of education and problems as possible. And we're educators. We don't want that, right? We didn't like the woke, we didn't like the propaganda that we saw our students go through. And we'd seen it getting worse. We'd seen it getting worse, right? So I was in Australia and I was still blissfully unaware around about 2005 of, oh, well, this is not bad, our universities are functioning well. And even our societies, I thought, were doing pretty well then. And so I was just doing my thing, making a career and busy with the kids and that kind of thing. And I'm pumping out research and minding how important I was in the system. But round about 2010, it started to become clear to me, oh, we really are getting a lot more corrupt now in our societies. Universities are becoming very bureaucratic, are starting to care less about students. Things weren't that bad yet, but they were getting a lot worse.
Mm.
But it was kind of, okay, academics are no longer in charge. We're second-rate citizens. Students are now starting to be less important. It's more starting to be
Customers.
about, fee-paying foreign students, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And basically, when Corona came, the lockdowns, the vaccines, which were, of course, a huge autocratic overreach in our societies, we thought, okay, this is getting ridiculous, right? Universities not even pushing it back against this. They're really not caring about the physical and mental health of their students. We got to do something about this. And also, we were then in the position to do something about this. Our kids had left the nest. We had good careers. We had reputation. We had networks. We'd made some money.
Mm.
And we said, okay, we're going to do this ourselves. We can't compete with 50,000 students, but we can set up at least one small new academy ourselves and have a vision in which there might be thousands
Mm.
of small new colleges all around the world. So we thought we'll do what we're good at, right? We'll set up a small academy, a little bit like the universities of centuries past, but then using the best techniques that we could, the best insights that we could gather, committed academics, and so that's what we did. We've set up a new academy. We've developed 3 months and 12 months programs. They're strong on critical thinking, freedom of thought, community formation.
Mm.
And we take the advantages of small. When you're small, you're nimble, you can do a broad curriculum, you can really innovate in what you teach and how you teach, which is something universities haven't been able to do for a century.
Mm.
So we've set up the best we could, which is very difficult for a big university. They're sort of stuck in their way. And we
Right.
have a campus community. So we really do try to look after both the physical and mental health of students. And of course, we make it their own problem as a community. Um, and so we've basically come up with a new concept of what a university can be like, right? It retains the best of classical
Hmm.
academia, but also the new problems we have today, which our ancestors didn't. Our ancestors never had mobile phones. They never had to worry about gaming addictions and the internet. And well, obesity was practically unknown in previous centuries. So, dietary problems, the only real problem there was centuries ago was not enough food. And
Hmm.
now we have very different problems. And so we're in a unique situation where we can try and tackle a lot of the problems of today in a campus environment, really take ownership as academics for the lives of our students, and try and work out how we can rekindle both academia and community living, which have both gone by the wayside. And that's been very exciting for us. Very stressful, of course, hard work, financially draining, but we feel we're trying to be part of the solution.
Mm. It seems like I had the feeling that when I was at the website looking around, there's an effort to get back to the liberal arts,
Mhm.
right? Classical, you know, and critical thinking was really that really stood out to me. I think, well, at least a lot of my colleagues talk about the importance of critical thinking, and we know it's important, but it's difficult to see it operationalized in the classroom. So many students don't seem to be thinking independently,
Mhm.
creatively outside of the major media they consume, the echo chambers, and they've just been trained to act as parrots. I think it's a noble effort, what's being undertaken right now in the academy, that there is a definite return to critical
Mhm.
thinking and pure logic and reason. Many of the key words used to describe the invitation to prospective students, it seemed to be entirely free of the buzzwords peculiar to the
Mhm.
corporatization of higher education today, such as leveraging vast resources, or networking is another one, global opportunities, achieving equity. In their place at the website are more common and concrete, real human references to human creativity and social connection. Emphasis seems to be on community and making
Mhm.
friends, engaging in culture, and developing skills that will translate into improved societies. This all suggests something that's radically different than what we see in efforts, say, by
Mhm.
the World Economic Forum's Global Leaders Program. Can you discuss what you feel are some of the most important features of Academia Libera Mentis that really distinguishes it from other programs of similar remit?
Yes, thank you very much. It's a very kind way to describe exactly indeed what our feeling is as well, a getting away from corporatization, remaining small, right, so that we can do it. And let me pick that up on the theme of critical thinking. Um, because in a way, the recipe for becoming a critical thinker has been known for thousands of years, which is that people need to be challenged a little bit. You need to ask them questions. Well, if you think this, do you then also think that? And well, okay, you see this in the news, but is that really true? Where would have they gotten that data from? And why did they give that interpretation? Are there other interpretations? And in a way, it's a muscle that every human has in principle to be able to think critically. Um, but as you say, in mainstream universities, this was avoided like the plague. And one of the reasons for that is that, well, it would upset the political and corporate masters to really question things. If a medical student questions whether or not most of the drugs on the market are actually useful, well, the pharmaceuticals won't like that. And of course, if an economist questions whether all the people who are super rich really are super rich because they're such wonderful inventors, or else because they're such politically connected, well, that sort of rocks the boat as well. Right? And similar things are true for everywhere where you're talking about human behavior and human nature. Is that universities now are gearing you up for a life of compliance and don't want you to ask critical questions. And we thought, well, we initially thought it would be easy that, well, we just, we exercise the muscle. But as we got going, we started to realize more and more that students need to give each other permission to think critically. And they're not looking for the teachers for permission, or from each other, because as you say, they're now used to already as teenagers to be in a social media environment whereby if you step out a little bit outside the group, you get cancelled, you get trampled upon, you're seen as an outlier, and you're made fearful. The internet remembers. They say something that is politically incorrect, and they're never forgiven. Their careers are threatened, and they're just afraid.
Hmm.
And so we realize we really have to create a community environment in which it is normal to challenge each other a little bit respectfully. We don't want them to fight needlessly or to hurt needlessly, but there is this element of look, we need this muscle to grow, and we need to see this as normal, that we don't always agree, and that we can, as human beings, talk to each other and talk things through. If I like a different diet than you, it's not because I am evil or you're evil. No, we might have grown up with different ideas as to what good food is, and we might enjoy different food, but it's not like we're trying to poison each other. And if we're going to make meals for each other, well, in some way, we're going to get to a compromise or at least an understanding of the other. Right? And if you get into the habit of really talking to each other, also about boy-girl stuff, about propaganda stuff, or about, whether your country's history is that wonderful or anybody's country's history is that wonderful. Once people really start to treat each other like human beings in a community again, the critical thinking is much easier as academics to instill as well. It comes much more naturally. And so we found that a lot of the learning comes from the students to each other. And it also comes just via living together. They get to hear each other's little noises, and they get irritated, and
Hmm.
the favorite toys is used by the others, and they smell things they don't like about each other. And we first thought this is terrible. We must be all pristine, but we now realize no, this is good. This is how they learn to be tolerant towards each other, because they can't just all be each other's victim. This is it, right? There is a social community environment where they got to make a living with each other as a community. And so after the first few days and weeks in which they might try to sort of outdo each other in the victimhood stakes, they realize there is no daddy they can run to. They gotta work it out with these people.
Hmm.
And these people are not evil. They just have a different background. And they, by gradually getting used to the tolerance to each other's differences and talking things through, they also start to accept, okay, it's not so bad if somebody else thinks something differently. Maybe they have a good reason for that. It doesn't mean they're right, but maybe they think they have a good reason. It's not because they're innately evil. And so the two are together, right?
Hmm.
Critical thinking partly is, of course, the academic game of think about this and the consequences of that.
Hmm.
That is all standard for thousands of years, but it comes together in the community environment. And so the community environment is warm and supportive, but also it is made by the students. They cook together. They're each other's friends. They go to bars together, but they have to work it out, right?
Yeah.
They sleep in one castle. They can't afford to sort of, have terrible enemies. So they work it out, right? They have
Mm,
long conversations with each other. And that works. And so the two are two sides of the same coin, really. Is that the community environment interacts with the whole academic teaching in a way that they give each other permission, they become each other's friends, they take ownership of the community, and also the community starts to be the way in which they practice a lot of principles in class, a lot of the principles to do with leadership, management. How do you organize things?
mm,
How do you get over tensions? We do that, right? And
mm,
they set up their own experiments as to okay, how we're going to negotiate about the diet. Well,
mm,
then all kinds of things in class
mm.
get practiced.
Cooperation, imagine. Yeah. So it's yeah, it's an emphasis on community and cohesion and communication, supporting one another. And uh, I think as you've described it, it reminds me a little bit of a move toward new values. That the values are not necessarily achieving the goal of being fabulously wealthy in terms of material wealth, but learning how to be a human being in a culture, in a community again. Are most of the students European, or do you have students from other areas of the world?
Nearly all are Western,
Okay.
right? Nearly all are Western. And because we've only just started, we had quite small groups of students who went through the total program. But we've had large groups of volunteer backpacking students who were here for, 3, 4 weeks at a time, who follow part of the program. And they've come from everywhere in the world. I think we've had Japanese, we've had Chinese, we've had Chilean, Brazilian, Colombian, Mexican, lots of countries in Europe, definitely. The odd South African and Canadian.
Mm,
Um, and in that sense, we've discovered that they're all very similar. The problems of youth are very similar everywhere around the world. They nearly all have some kind of addiction to their mobile phone, to their social media image. They're very sensitive towards political correctness. Um, of course, if they come here, they usually do have a very supportive background, right? So
mm,
they're still reasonably well-functioning families, and they're reasonably sort of mentally and physically healthy, but they often are struggling with community, and they have often not really experienced that. Although that does depend by country, right? The Latinos still do have quite a strong community culture. So for
mm,
them, it was much less unusual than for the Europeans, particularly the Northern Europeans, the Australians, the Americans. They sort of hardly knew what community was anymore. They'd never experienced that. Um, and so yeah, they come in with similar problems. And as you say, the learning how to be a member of a community, that has been new for the vast majority of them. And I have to say, it was also a bit new for me, and it was new for our academics. Because I've been part of warm families. I've been very lucky in this regard, but I've never really lived together with many other families under one roof. And you really got to work things out, and you can't quite run away, particularly not if you're the guy who does a lot of the organization.
mm,
Yeah, you've got a conflict. You got to work it through. There's just no running away or sort of,
mm,
ignoring it. And that learning how to be a villager almost is new for me because I'm a city boy. I'm not used to being a villager. And so it was also a bit of an eye opener for me being forced to become comfortable with people who are very different,
mm,
whom I previously would have never liked or tried to understood, and now you have to. You just have to.
mm.
that is good, right? So it's one of the things we indeed do, and we didn't quite realize that this was going to be so important, that we are now a community incubator,
Mm.
right? Students come in separate. We've had whole families come and sort of, think that I'll borrow the word, we'll do a great reset as a family. We'll become critical thinkers, but also separate from the rest of society, or at least from mainstream society, will become part of more a critical thinking society. Um, and they too was kind of, yes, this we now know what it's like to be a villager. Okay. Um, and it doesn't mean they'll be a villager after forever, but they know then what it is. And there is that sense of stronger together, even though, yes,
Mm.
there's a lot of time spent in getting on with each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you said about technology nowadays. It seems to, especially, all the promises that have been made about technology and social media to to make more cohesive and social creatures. Obviously, it's done the opposite, splintering communities and families, and I mean, even in the classroom, it's it's a constant struggle for me to create research cohorts and to get students to put their phone down and to focus on what's going on in the research team. So I think that's a what you said really resonates with me about the necessity of getting back to what it means to be human and what it means to be in a
Mhm.
community of other human beings who have the same goals and the same needs and who are sharing their perspectives and their values, and they want to learn something about making a better society. I think that's extraordinary, and it's absolutely necessary
Mhm.
because of where we're at right now and how and what technology is doing to people all over the world.
Mhm.
I mean, the point that you made is really important point. We're seeing it everywhere. American students that I've had recently have difficulty focusing. They can't put their phones down. My Japanese students, yeah, it's a very big problem. So yeah, yeah, I wonder if part of it is trying to deprogram students so that they become
Mhm.
more human. I don't want to say that they're all automatons these days, but it is quite striking. I've noticed it over the past 10 years that so many young people, especially since the rollout of the COVID story, really turned their smartphones into like pacifiers. They don't want to put them down. So yeah, I was I was thinking about, my own students, and I wonder what students like mine what they could expect. Pretty well versed in English, coming from Japan or Korea. What could they? I wonder what they could expect at the academy there.
Um, you have Japanese students, right? Korean and Japanese students from that culture.
Yeah.
I've been to both places, and I think that it would be a true shock to them. I think it would be a real shock to them. And I think if they survive the first couple of weeks and months, they'll really love it. But that initial culture shock, I think, would be quite intense for them. And let me try and explain what I mean with that, right? I think that for kids, let's say from America or from Australia, who will come to us, And as you say, they're atomized. They live in a world of sex toys where they don't really talk to each other much, and they have their mobile phone is also their friend and their confidant and this and that. But at least they will still come from a world in which they will have books talking about critical thinking, and they'll have read things of people centuries ago. And what we do is a sort of a faint echo in their minds as to, oh yeah, no, that's what my dad and mum were on about. Oh yeah, this is what they said university was like 30 years ago, something like that, right? There'll be a resonance to that. But what the Japanese and Korean students really would have to get used to is as it were yeah, the aspects that come with real openness. Other people will say things about their clothes and their smell and their little habits, and they'll be jocular and they'll be self-deprecating, and it will feel somewhat disrespectful, but also a kind of a there is no place here for masks. All this face stuff that you're used to your whole life is off here. We treat each other as humans, warts and all. We don't hide the warts. Here they are. We're not socially great at this. We might not be good at that. And we don't pretend we are, because we really try for an environment in which we take each other serious as human beings and work things out together and help each other. That also comes with a no nonsense kind of thing that we aim for and that we become, and the culture that we have come from. We're kind of Northern European Dutch, but also rough Australian. That is that, let's not pretend we're better than we are.
Mm.
And so it's something very much we cultivate, because only then can you really be a community. When, okay, you see each other warts and all, but we've all got flaws and this and that. So no pretense.
Mm.
And the lack of face. And I know how important face is in Japanese and Korean culture.
Mm.
So to come into an academic culture which has no face, which in that sense is true egalitarian, I think will be a tremendous shock culturally for them. Now, if they manage to overcome that, and that's a big if, right? If they manage to overcome that, I think they'll love it, right? Because it'll be a way of being a human that'll be probably unique, probably a once in a lifetime experience, and also a power of community that you get via that, via a much greater openness and togetherness. They will really start to see themselves and their own culture critically, which will be of a form that'll be a complete eye opener to them. We have a very broad curriculum, so they will start to see humanity in a way that'll be sort of amazing to them, right? We talk about pride and love and religion and flattery and bullying as very normal things. Both things thought as good and bad become gray and become just aspects of the human toolkit, if you like. And that'll be a wow, right? It's not moralistic. It's not black and white. It's not this is good, this is bad. No, it's just this is functional for this and this is functional for that. So it's recognizably scientific and evolutionary and that kind of thing. But it'll be amazing for them to speak about society, human organization in such a way, right? I doubt they'll even gossip with their friends and that kind of openness. And there's some classic things about, data and economics and finance and how politics works. That'll also be new to them. But I think the cultural stuff, ooh, okay. So if you're going to send your students, send us those you think can handle that, because that there my mind goes, okay, a no-face society. What is that even? Right? I mean,
Mm.
I don't know if you'd be able to explain it to them.
Yeah, it would be a challenge.
Exactly. That would be a challenge to them. That would be a challenge, but also hence a complete eye opener once if they survive that cultural contact.
Mm. Professor Paul Frijters, thank you so much for the excellent introduction to the Academy. Again, it's Academia Libera Mentis. We'll leave the URL the hyperlink in the show notes. And Paul, could you maybe leave some other resources, some links to your work for me so that we can register that in the show notes?
Of course, I'll send you a couple of links. We've got a new book out, Minds of Brave. What is it again? Minds that Dare. That's what it was, a phrase by one of our students. That's what we are. And it tells you about the history, what we do, what our hopes are for the future, how people can be part of this, how people can set up these organizations in their own countries. And yeah, indeed, reclaim what it is to be human, to be a community, to be academics. Yeah,
Amen
I
to
will.
that.
I'll send them to you.
Please do. Great
Right.
talking with you.
It's been fun, Dan.